I'm Patrick McKinnon. This is a book called Are You My Father that actually got pretty popular back in the day from Die Young Press in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Poems in here have been published in magazines like Bog and Mall Life and Impetus and Zib and Poetry Motel and the Third Lung Review and National Public Radio series Journeys on the Job. And the reason I want to read it tonight is because my dad's getting his wake on Thursday. That's what, 4 days from now or so. And I had a lot of issues with my dad, as people did back in those days and probably still do. And I wrote this poem about him, all these poems about him, just to kind of get him off my chest and be able to move forward. And so I wanted to read it. There again, that's a really bad introduction anyway. It's called Are You My Father? And it's for Jack McKinnon. Introduction. In 1620, Thomas Brownell, an independent indentured servant, sailed to Portsmouth, Rhode Island in the New World. It's what he got for being Cromwellian by descent, but it was better than Yorkshire and poverty and skinny sheep. 4 generations later, Jeremiah Brownell Jr. was made a free man because his father was killed saving the life of his master. America was beginning to resemble England, flexing its muscles and liquoring itself up for revolution, so he legged it to New Brunswick with his wife, his brother, and his newborn son. The wild maritime was hostile and extreme. The son became a British soldier, killed enough natives to warrant a land grant, and son upon son, Brownells filled the woods until my great-great-grandpa, James Wilson Brownell, was born, got rich, and died at Cold Spring Head, Amherst Shore, Cumberland County, Nova Scotia, leaving 2 wives and 13 children, so at least we know his dick worked. In 1880, my great-grandpa, John Wilbur Brownell, slipped west to Minnesota, and I doubt his family ever noticed he was missing, opened a tailoring shop in 2 Harbors to sew spring suits for the lumberjacks and the ironworkers once the White Pines were gone. His daughter, my grandma, cold as the winter, married a good-timing drinker from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and spent the Depression tracking him down from the Bowery to speakeasies in the central hillside of Ice Waterfall City, and bore a son, which brings me to the subject of my father. My father was a bookie. My father was a bookie who lost it all in '69 when those fucking Mets won the series at 150 to 1 odds. It kicked his ass to lose so much. Kicked his ass right onto a couch in Cleveland, and cable and beer and chocolate and smokes. And for dear old Dad, every baseball season's a trauma. He slowly fries as the pennant race progresses, his nerves sticking out in all directions, his hair is gone, and his teeth are following suit. It's as if the games have been giving him hundreds of long, long electrical shocks, year after year after year. after year. I used to own a hotel, he likes to tell me. And we was gonna get us a big league franchise down in Orlando, back in the days when Beatrice was still around. I never bothered mentioning to him that Beatrice was my mother and I was there because my father never looks at me. I'm sure he only recognizes my name when I stop over with a case of Miller and a carton of Benson and Hedges. Someday, I'm going to kill my father by confessing to him that I played for the Mets in '69 under the name of Ron Swoboda, and that impossible diving catch I made in right field to save Game 4 and turn the series around was the pinnacle of my life. And pulling the ball from my glove, my face grinning open like a laughing grave for my father's coffin, I said, "Hi, Dad, fuck you, and welcome home." The media thought it was very touching and rather queer when I told them I never really liked baseball much and couldn't possibly have made that catch without the powerful inspiration of my father. My father was a carny man. Carny men are the beat black holes hired to work rides and offset cheap incandescent colored lights. My father ran the Thunderbolt, a fifth in his pocket and no front teeth to block the flow. Only thing he ever said to me was, "Come on, kid, let's go." The moment the Thunderbolt got flipping and spinning, my father was looking away out across the carny real hard like a big weird kid who can't find his mom. I hated the Thunderbolt, but I always rode it when the Mighty Thomas show was in town. Rode it till I was 24. Must have cost me $300. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't pocket the cash and stand right there in front of the old boy, blocking his view, getting right up in his face, saying, "Dad, it's me, Patrick, your son. Don't you remember?" The Thunderbolt made me throw up, and more than once a slender slice of vomit hit my dad. Hours would pass, him pulling the levers and working the gate, that puke scrap on his coat or his hat or his boot, he was too gone to care. My son was born when I was 25, the year the carny came and the Thunderbolt looked naked without my dad. I asked the new kid where my father was, but the new kid didn't seem to know him. No one else there seemed to know him either. My son is 9 years old. We know each other. We celebrate each other. We've laughed more hours than I ever rode your ride. And chaos has set the world at last on fire, so goodbye, Dad, wherever you are. King of the Thunderbolt. But not anymore. My father was a draft dodger. My father was a draft dodger, and that was no mean feat in 1943, Homerville, Georgia. The war. The war. The war had pounded his friend. It had his friend, Ray Franken, pound nails in his hands and feet, whip his forehead with juniper sticks, and leave him hanging in the garage 3 days. It's not that Dad was a conscientious objector, or a communist, or a Gnostic. Dad just didn't want his jacking off hand shot off, and think of all the movies he'd miss. Think of all the movies he'd miss over there. The draft board took one look at the old man, shipped him out to the VA hospital, and from there to an asylum in the marshes of Alviso, north of San Jose, where he lived the remainder of his life without further communication from his family. My dad was a party crasher. Mother was a career girl, sprawling East Coast family in the 50s, till she met my father. Crashed a St. Patrick's Day party at her church. He was an opium dealer in San Francisco. Had me as fast as no condoms, married very Catholic, and that ended Mother's career. Mother was a tiny woman. When they dragged me out, I was half her size. 100 years earlier, it would have killed us both. My father was forever in Frisco doing opium, and Mother had traded her career for me and a dark, empty house in Morro Bay, isolated sea town, central nowhere, California. Nipples hurt worse every day. Doc said, feed me plastic, and plastic made me cry. Whole affair made her cry. Abandoned me to the playpen, the backyard, the fog, the bees. And I screamed at those fucking bees. Screamed my face bloody with sweat, passed out and refused to dream until I was 5 and went to live with my Grandma Lavis in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Her fingernails so wicked, her rage so great. I had to dream just to stay alive. My father was a pothead. Says he doesn't know how he got started, but he was 9. Smoked his first joystick, Mary Jane, in the 1920s in Duluth, Minnesota. In the 30s, he joined a Christian Brothers seminary north of St. Louis, Missouri. In the 40s, he went to Point Barrow, Alaska, then to the Northwest Territories. I can't figure where the hell he got pot in places like that. Maybe from my grandpa in the mail. My grandma says my grandpa wrote a bit of poetry. When I was born in 1957, my father was living in San Bruno, California, smoking more dope than Kerouac, and growing it too. He was a connoisseur. Made me start smoking when I was 4. I had quite a tolerance by the time I was 10. My father is a lesbian. My father is a lesbian, sits up all night with copies of Vogue, big fits of sweat growing like cauliflower from the corners of his mouth. Refuses to have any sort of dealings with men, which includes speaking to me. He comes to visit and consumes 2 weeks balefully telling Andrea how he misses my mother so much all the time and really wants to get married again. As a toddler, his mother used to dress him in dresses and call him Jackie instead of John. And Grandpa was an oarboat cook who beat people on the few days each year he was home and lives forever on the wall of my father's brain like his license to be an asshole. My father left home at 17 for the very same reasons that I left. He joined a seminary in Tulsa, wishing, I'm sure, it was a convent instead, and stayed 6 years, then ran away a week before the church was going to make him a brother, and he married my mother and churned out 7 miserable children, 2 of them already dead. When my father was 5, Grandpa took him to a doctor. He was scaring her. When my father was 5, Grandma took him to a doctor. He was scaring her, playing with his penis so much. The doctor warned her to be stern and then examined my father's eyes, said he already had his vision and it was beginning to fail, and life's hard enough without going blind. This morning at breakfast, my father told the children he's not going to church at St. Michael's because it's a family church, and he doesn't have a family now since Mother died. Molly, who's 6, said, "Grandpa, you know it takes a very long time to die. See, you just keep on living and living and living and living as long as anyone remembers you." This is Molly, who's 6. But my father never heard that. He was busy reading the paper in his usual way, obituaries first, then wedding announcements, and last, but not least, the underwear ads. My father was the man who lived at our house.
Hold up, the battery's dying. We're gonna have to cut it really quick.
That's good.
And start back in.
No, that's good enough. My father was the man who lived at our house. There was this man lived at our house. We called him Dad, because he legally came inside our mom at least 7 times in 10 years. Until that was over, she couldn't stand his crying. This man was a sour steak every dinner, cowered at the head of the table, and mostly his advice to us was how he couldn't wait till we were grown up and moved away. In 1923 was a lynching. 3 circus blacks in downtown Biloxi. This man was a boy there. He saw those men swing, and he swore by God he'd never break the law for the rest of his life. Only one time I ever heard this man swear he broke his elbow falling to mend a rotted gutter. He screamed, "God damn it!" loud to the whole neighborhood, and especially to me, our mother's favorite. He outlived her. His elbow is fine now, and he's glad. Poem from my father. Northern lights are green ice up the winter sky, and my father called on the phone today. Called to tell me he's going out the back door again by marrying a woman he met last week, and he's going to play the Christmas stranger with her kids in Boulder, Colorado, instead of Christmas with my sister who lives in Milpitas, where they dump the garbage from San Jose. My father lives in San Jose, and when I was a kid, I always told my sister how stupid she was and how ugly she was and how much I couldn't stand her. These were the things my father told me when I was young enough to think he was God. Techniques my father had learned from his father. I remember the day I hit a line drive off my father's chest, and he got his breath back. When he finally got his breath back, I pitched and struck him out till dark, and we went home. After that, I held the paint stick he used to spank us with, and arguments were wars in my father's house, where he would run out to the backyard and wait for my mother to smooth it over. So, my sister went to work in a summer camp and married the first guy she met just to get away from it all. 12 years later, she's tattered and wrung out and getting this divorce. I see her when I sleep, standing at the cliff in the fog of her life, and mother is dead, and Milpitas is stinking, and my brother is an asshole because my father always told him he would be one. The northern stars behind the northern lights are prismatic and pulsing. The voice on the phone said he's finally gotten over my mother, like she's some nasty illness that made you cough so hard you shit your pants. And after the holidays, the newlyweds are moving to Oregon. They've both always wanted to live there. This is news to me, since I don't remember my father ever mentioning Oregon, much less wanting to live there. After one skirmish when I was 15, I went out back to find him in the backyard. It was time he started hearing what I had to say, but the backyard was empty, and the plum tree didn't have any plums. I even looked in our fort and behind the tangled dying of tomato plants in the garden. Maybe he went to the library and read books about Oregon, though of course that didn't occur to me then. See, tonight, the northern lights snows itself upon me like a message from an ancient stored up for this time. I told Dad, I'm sick of you running away, and I'm sorry you're getting married, and it rains so much in Oregon you can feel the earth sliding out from underfoot to the sea, and it's tragic you never really liked me, and I'm sorry your mom and dad made your childhood electrocution, and it looks like the family you raised is breaking up fast. You have to find some way to like yourself, Dad, and you have to stop running because you're getting too old and everything is catching up to you. He screamed across 3,000 miles of phone line. I don't need this at my stage in life! And slammed me down the dial tone like the saddest goodbye sung out a machine's throat. So maybe this is finally the end of a long and grueling plot in my life, and tonight the northern lights are grieving spangled wind-stiffed air. Eskimo shamans dance across them in silhouette, laughing so hard the sky cracks open and swallows the midnight morning. Sometimes I feel I'm living someone else's life. Like right now, I'm drinking someone else's tea at someone else's table in someone else's house. I see Patrick McKinnon in a picture and say, yeah, I know that guy, but where's me? I often wonder how I got into this Patrick McKinnon movie. And it makes me laugh thinking about Patrick McKinnon trying to survive his life without me.